probably prefer in a situation that is kind of general situation, which we mostly have. Imagine you make a hotel or a hospital, or create a hospital. So we have to find out if there are some general preferences or not. Because what's the alternative towards it? The alternative is just to take your own intuition and think it's right. It might be right, you know, but it might be wrong either. Or take a zeitgeist phenomenon and say, well, everybody does it, so I do it too. You know, many work on that as well. Sometimes it might be the right solution, but then it might also not be the right solution. And I think to your question, René, you asked about this, how can we argument for sustainable architecture based on the reuse of buildings? I think there are several scientific strains pointing at the same aspect. The one is Antonovsky. I'm sure you have heard of him. He's a very famous sociologist, and he asked the question, what factors of the environment makes us healthy? So in other words, salutogenesis it is called. And in his system, the value of coherence is the most important factor. And coherence means that most of all psychological needs, people need a consciousness for being embedded in a senseful story of their lives. And as soon as they have it, they can stand a lot of difficulties and so on. And he made a lot of research with people who had a very hard biographical story, kind of people who were in cassettes or something like that, and he tried to find out how could they survive in a psychological way. And he thought and he found out people who had the ability to integrate what happened to them in a senseful way in their life had the best factor of resilience then afterwards. And other studies point at the same thing. I know studies. People love to embed everything they experience in a certain kind of story. So, and this is what old buildings do. They tell us stories and help us to construct time in our minds, because that's what we do all the time. We don't know what time is actually, but we construct it. We tell ourselves the story of our past. We tell ourselves the story, that's what we are. And we also construct the future because nobody will know it. So we have to construct it. So as you see, we are the ones that construct time, and this time is also a story. So it all makes sense, it all comes together. And my conclusion is that old buildings support this construction of time and history and so on in the heads of people, and that makes them more satisfied to be being embedded.
I'm not asking this, but when you say this, many of the buildings you showed as, I think, not so evocative negative examples by now are also pretty old. So I would be interested in the reuse of the modernist bland things you showed, but I think that's not really at the heart of this panel. So we can discuss this later, exactly. Yeah.
Just to make one point about Australia, so it has a fairly, like maybe 250 years of European Anglo-Saxon settlement. So a lot of our buildings are sort of, like they might be mimicking Egyptian, neoclassical or whatever, but they don't have this, when I come to Europe, there's this built environment. And that's not to say, we've got the oldest living culture of indigenous peoples for 60,000 years, but in terms of the built environment, this idea of adaptive reuse is really okay, maybe from a regenerative point of view, but not necessarily. It's the same conversation about history and memories and so on.
Thank you, René, for your question. The two of you can now see whether you can squeeze together or whether you want to take your book and...
Oh, come on.
Okay, Jeremy, you had a question, and then Else is next.
First, I'd like to say thanks, Michael and Tuna, for fantastically beautiful presentations. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. I had a really good question to Michael, and that was, that's better. My question is, I felt you were swimming a little bit against the current in relation to everything else that had been said. So you said at one point that in order that design should be approved by science, we need to make it measurable. And I was wondering if that's true, actually. Do we have to be approved by science? Because there's a kind of consensus earlier that we don't. We operate on different parameters.
I think I wouldn't claim something here. I would rather ask the question, what is science to us? What is the difference between art and science?